So now we're on unit 6, 7, and 8. All we got to go here. And now we're going to talk about learning. Specifically today, we're going to talk about behaviorism as far as learning goes, kind of a new school of thought here on psychology. And we're going to talk about classical conditioning. Operant conditioning will be in the next lecture. We'll mention a little bit today, but today the main focus is going to be on classical conditioning. These two types of learning that fall under what is known as the psychological branch of behaviorism. Okay, behaviorism is a study that all behavior that we do is observable. Everything we do, there's a reason. There is no unconscious, subconscious, automatic thought. It's that, well, I mean, some can be done subconsciously, but everything that we do can be traced back to a reward or punishment that we had gotten at some other point of our life. The reason that I call this a ball is because when I called this a rock, nobody responded appropriately. I call this a ball and somebody hands it to me and I'm rewarded with a ball. So I'm going to call it a ball. I'm not going to call it a rock. All right. So behaviorism basically says that all learning is based on this series of rewards and punishment that we get throughout our lives. Again, this is the opposite of, those like Darwin and Gestalt and I just went blank on the name. Darwin's cousin. Blank, totally blank. But these guys who had the idea that who you are is basically all sort of pre-wired. This is everything that we are is the rewards and punishment. The European behaviorists are ones who look at ethology. How is it triggered? How was it learned? How did it evolve? And the Europeans basically brought this forward as a rejection to eugenics, which was really popular amongst Hitler and his cronies prior to World War II, and sort of an excuse to eliminate certain races. So when we talk about learning, we're talking about a relatively permanent change in our behavior due to an experience. I get rewarded for something, I'm going to do that. I get punished for something, I'm going to avoid doing this. So everything that we do is based on experiencing. Nurturing is the key to learning, not nature, but nurture. Is how we basically come forward with everything. Humans are born with very few instincts. Basically, all of our behavior is learned behavior. And we talked about this a little bit when we talked about development. Remember, a baby doesn't know how to do much. I mean, if there was this thing called, mothers have this instinct, every woman would be a great mother, but that's not the case. Or every dad would be a great father. That's not the case. Basically, our mothering and our fathering skills are somewhat learned by what we observed happening to us or what we observed happening to others. Got to pause this real quick. Sorry about that. My wife needed an update on a FedEx package. So again, humans have very, very few instincts that we're born with. We do have a natural curiosity. I should have looked up that person's name it's escaping me and it's bugging me. It's in the back of my mind. We have a natural curiosity when we learn something new. Again, one of the reasons we can't get rid of these damn things is there's a possibility that new information could show up there. I was distracted in giving this lecture here because there was an alert from my wife and something from my wife. My heart beats a little bit faster because I like my wife. And it's, could you please send me some tracking information on something that was sent to her aunt, blah, 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 blah. And I figured, well, let's just knock it out now. And so now she's learned the information because I've given it to her and she got the little alert, whatever. So again, when we get new information, endorphins go off. Ooh, new information from my wife. Endorphins, pleasure. And it's not something I learned, it's something I already know. And not as much. It's why we constantly check our phones. We're looking for new information. When you get new information, it's fantastic. You get that information. Susie broke up with Johnny. Susie's available. It's exciting. But then when you get something you already know, Susie broke up with Johnny. And now I'm not getting that rush of endorphins. So sometimes I got to find pleasure in other endorphins or whatnot to sort of go along and replace that. Now, here's an example of learning with classical conditioning. Let's say that I was doing a research project and I wanted you to fill out various forms. So in order to get you to fill out various forms, I give you guys these purple pens to fill it out with. I just so happen to have kind of a lavender pen here, and I go, here's a purple pen. I'll be right back. I'm going to get the forms. I'll be right back. And then I go to get the forms. And while I'm gone, there's very pleasant music, little birds chirping, la-da-dee, la-da-doo, happy music is played. And it's a very pleasant temperature and kind of the smell of cookies in the air. It's all fantastic. Then I come back and I go, you know what? The people who printed these forms, they did it on purple paper. Purple pen ain't going to show up on purple paper. So what I need to do is I need to give you one of these green pens, and these green, I know it's a highlighter, and you're going to use these green pens to do it. So then I leave you with the green pens. I collect all the purple pens. I leave you with green pens. And when I leave you with the green pen, suddenly this bad garbage 3 days old and the heat smell sort of comes in, and you start to hear sounds of like a baby crying or nails against a chalkboard, if you can even know what that is at your particular age. And it's just a bad smell, and it starts to get very hot in the room and everything else. And then I come back and I say, you know what? They printed it on white paper. Doesn't matter. Use a green pen. Here's a purple pen. Use a green pen. Use a purple pen. Use whatever pen you want. Now, studies will show that most of us, whether consciously or subconsciously, will pick the purple pen. Why will we pick the purple pen? Because we've associated the purple pen with a better temperature, with better smells, and a better time. I've associated this with a good thing. This, nasty. Don't want it, don't like it, get me away from it. As a matter of fact, next time someone brings up, hey, there's this green, you know, we're going to associate the green with that bad little experience that we have. Okay, this is learning, and this is a type of conditioning known as classical conditioning. This is where PTSD comes from. We make these sort of associations, and learning is all about associations. Associative learning is when we put two things together, a stimuli and a response and its consequences, and that's how we kind of go with that stimuli later on. Our minds naturally connect these events, and they occur in sequence. We associate reading or TV viewing with going to sleep, which, by the way, is a bad association to do. A lot of people will go, well, how are you going to fall asleep tonight? I'll start reading. I like to read to fall asleep. Well, that seems fantastic because reading makes my eyes tired. I relax, I go to sleep, except tomorrow it's fifth period English class and it's open reading time. And you suddenly go, was the best of times was that I've associated reading with going to sleep. For a particular show. There's a couple of shows that I like to watch. You know, I'll watch some Seinfeld, I'll watch The Office, I'll watch The West Wing, Parks Rec, whatever. I like certain shows. Well, if I start to watch these shows on my little phone to get to sleep at night, because, you know, it's something I've seen before, it's pretty repetitive, not a big deal. I'll watch that show. Well, if I come home this afternoon, it's right after school. I come home this afternoon, okay, Comedy Central, The Office is on. Guess what's going to happen in 10 minutes? Because I've associated with going to sleep. Now, on the other hand, when I got a text message from my wife, I've associated that with pleasure and a good time and happiness. I see a text from my wife, I go, oh, this is important because it's from her. Okay. So again, we make these associations all the time, and we don't all make the same associations though. If I ask you right now as a group, how many of you have ever been to the, well, you've all been to the dentist, but how many of you guys enjoy going to the dentist versus how many of you hate it? Those of you who hate going to the dentist will mention the scrapiness and all those other things, and you feel judged for what you haven't done appropriately over the years and whatnot. I don't like it. So every time, if your parents just say you have a dentist appointment or you walk up the stairs to the dentist's office, you start to sweat. Yet others of you who have had very pleasurable experiences at the dentist's office and you're told you've got a dental appointment, you go, great, fantastic. I love my dental hygienist. I think she's very funny. I leave and say, I feel so clean. So you associate the dentist with a good time. So again, depending on experiences, some people will associate positive, some people will start to associate negative, depending on does it give you satisfaction or not. And then what we'll do is we'll take this association and we'll tie it to other things. You know, you get that little drill at the dentist office, a little zzz, sort of a sound. And then you're at a construction site and you hear and you hear another drill and you're like, because you've associated those things, a certain smell, whatever. This is my daughter. She's about 5 or 6 years old when this picture was taken. And we were at NASA every Wednesday at NASA. I don't know why. There was a guy there with snakes. I don't know. Snakes on a spaceship. I don't know what's going on there. There was a guy with snakes. So she's like, there's a guy and he's holding this. I don't even know that it is a boa constrictor. I don't know what kind of snake that is. But he's holding these and he's like, would anyone like to come up and hold the snake? And I'm like, no, because I know a snake could wrap around you and kill you if it wanted to. My daughter doesn't know this. So my daughter says, Daddy, can I go hold the snake? I go, yes, fantastic. Go ahead and hold the snake. I'm not going to put my bad feelings on her. And I know what you may be saying, but what if it kills your daughter? We're going to stop by McDonald's on the way home. But she's going, I don't want to give her that fear. Now she asked me, do you want to hold the snake? No. She asked me, Daddy, can we get a snake? No, because I've associated them with bad times. And this is all learning that we do. Now, again, some associations show learned biases that happen over time. And some of these biases are good and some are bad. For example, there's 2 values of a cow. Okay, well, there's a lot of values of a cow, but there's two major values of a cow. It could be either a source of food or a source of worship. And if I showed you cowboy boots and a hat, and I showed you somebody here with a Nehru jacket and a sari, and I said, which is associated with worship and which is associated with beef, you would, in all likelihood, go, they're going to eat it. They're more likely to worship it, because you've associated these with those things. Now, again, this means that you've associated this with people from India or people who specifically are Hindu. You've associated this with cowboys and ranchers, and you've put these things together. There's nothing about the fabric in these clothes that have anything to do with the worship. There's nothing about the style of hat or the boots that say anything about steak. But we make these associations and we make them nonstop. And we just add and add and add and add to our vocabulary of associations that we make. Some of them good, some of them bad. You take a look at a kid right here. Child abuse will leave tracks in the brain. A child who faced a lot of abuse is going to react very, very, very harshly and at a very high level to angry faces, as opposed to someone who's not faced abuse. They just go, oh, that's just a mean face. But a child who's been abused goes, oh my God, that's a mean face. And that means danger. So again, depending on our experiences, we can have very different sort of reactions to the exact same stimuli. All right. Now, classical conditioning, 2 types of conditioning here, classical and operant. We're going to focus on classical conditioning today, but we'll mention operant. Classical conditioning is where you already know how to do something. And what you're going to do is you're going to change the stimulus. Okay, these are things I already know how to do. Loud noises make me scared. You're born that way. It's why when a child learns the word no, they're told no, it's really loud. Okay, so loud noises naturally make us scared. That's unconditioned. Lightning is followed by thunder, the loud noise. So then what happens is I associate the light of the lightning with the loud noise, and eventually just the lightning is going to make me scared because of the loud noise. I'm going to associate those 2 things together. Now, again, I already know how to be scared. I was born knowing how to be scared. It's now lightning makes me scared. Not just the loud sound of thunder, but the flash of the light, which I've associated with the loud sound of the thunder, which I associate with the fear. That's classical conditioning. Operant conditioning, on the other hand, is I learn a skill I never knew how to do before. Okay, I can't get a cookie on my own. I can't bake a cookie when I'm a little kid. I can't get it on my own. I ask my parents, can I have a cookie? They say no. May I please have a cookie? They say yes. Aha. If I say the word please, I get the cookie. If I'm polite, I get the cookie. If I clean my room, I get the cookie. I wasn't born knowing how to clean my room. Wasn't born knowing how to say the word please. But I want the reward of the cookie. So I learn these things in order to get it. That is operant conditioning. This also proves that consistency is important when teaching a new skill. If you ask your parents, can I stay out late tonight? No, please. No, come on, please. Can I stay out late tonight? Please, please. It's so important. Okay, fine. You don't learn that no means no. You just learn that no means escalate and crank it up a little bit. This is why you got to be very consistent. And this is also why the number one complaint, students have a lot of complaints, but one of the bigger complaints that students have about teachers is a lack of consistency, like with late work. Sometimes they accept it, sometimes they don't. That's frustrating. Either never accept the late work or always accept the late work. It's the inconsistency because we can't learn based on inconsistent messages. So again, training, whatever, you've got to be very consistent with your messages. And that's the behaviorist approach here. Now, Pavlov, who was a Russian scientist, a biologist, who actually was studying digestive systems of humans. He kind of accidentally gets known with psychology. But when it's studying the digestive systems of humans in the early 1900s, you can't really hook up tubes to humans and see how much spit they're producing. So instead, he took dogs. Let me hook up a dog, give him some food, put a little tube in his mouth right here, slice open his cheek, drain the saliva, see how much saliva he gets, and what impact that saliva has on his ability to digest food. And the reason they do this with dogs is because dogs have a very similar digestive system to humans, whatnot. All right, so that's great. That's what he's doing. But then what started to happen after doing this for a few weeks, every time he brought the dogs into the lab where he would give them the food, the dogs started to salivate once they were in the lab because they were starting to associate the lab with being fed. Not only that, every time they saw the doctors show up in their white jackets, just the color white was making the dogs salivate because they were associating the white lab coats with, oh, these are the people who feed me. And so you can't just, salivation is not something you can just do. Okay, if I said right now, salivate, go. Do it, salivate. You can't just do it. In the same way, I can't go be scared right now, be scared, be happy, be calm. I can't just make your heart beat faster right now. Digest this food quicker right now. Go, get your digestive. You can't do it. You can't do those things. So what he's doing is he's seeing automatic behavior that is now being reconditioned to operate to a different stimuli. This accidental discovery study how a dog's, when studying how a dog's stomach would digest food, he's looking at what happens naturally. And when we talk about what happens naturally, we're talking about unconditioned. We just naturally do this. We see food, we salivate, we all do. We all do. Food causes a salivation, again, unless you have an eating disorder or some other issues going on. But food causes us to salivate. It's a positive thing. We are preparing to take the food on. So that's unconditioned stuff. Then what he did was he took a neutral stimulus, something that had nothing to do with the food. Now, of course, Pavlov originally used a tuning fork, but we all know the bell, so let's use the bell. So then he takes a bell, ring the bell at the dog, ding-a-ding-a-ding, ding-a-ding-a-ding, ding-a-ding-a-ding. No salivation, no reason for salivation. It's just the sound of a loud bell. Why would I salivate at that? So then what he does is he's got this unconditioned stimulus, which is the meat, and he's got this natural reaction of the salivation. So then what he starts to do is take the neutral stimulus of the bell, ring the bell every time you give the unconditioned stimulus. And then so every time, bell, food, bell, food, bell, food, bell, food. Eventually, just the ringing of the bell is going to be enough to start the salivation. Just the ringing of the bell. Ring the bell, food, bell, food, bell, food, bell, food, bell, food. That in of itself is enough. So again, and he did this with a lot of different things. He did this with a red circle food, red circle food, red circle food. Eventually they salivated at a red circle. So I take something that has nothing to do with food and I can get them to salivate with that because they've associated it with what naturally causes salivation, which was the food. So let's break this down real quick. The unconditioned stimulus food causes an unconditioned response of salivation. Naturally happens. Food caused me to salivate. I was born that way. So if I take a bell, neutral stimulus, and every time I ring that bell, sorry, that was CFISD calling me about who knows what. Every time I ring that bell, then I give them food, and then they're going to start salivating to the bell. That is learned behavior. Now, here's what's important. Notice the stimulus is what changes. The response does not. Salivation, salivation. The response is the same. What's changing is what is causing the response of salivation. Now, if you want, pause this video, go to my website. There's a video of The Office, a very famous video of a prank that's done on The Office where Jim gets Dwight to salivate every time he restarts his computer, and Dwight starts to salivate towards the bell. That is classical conditioning. Now, in the scene where Dwight reaches out his hand for the Altoid, That's operant conditioning. That's a little bit different, okay? Which we'll talk about more in the next lecture. Now, this can be done with a lot of associations. For example, the German scientists in 1938 came up with this little invention here to stop bedwetting. And that's a natural problem that kids have because, again, as a kid, you learn if I need to pee, I just pee, and because I have a diaper on and someone come around it to change it. So what's going to cause, the fact that a full bladder never woke you up before, what woke you up was, my pants are all wet, or my diaper's all wet. That made me wake up and cry. But in the idea of that, the full bladder doesn't make you wake up. So what they did was they put a little pad on the bed. Okay, and when the pad first becomes wet, ding, 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 a bell goes off right as it's starting, so the child will hurry up and get up and go to the bathroom. So this is nice warning sign that they go to the bathroom. But what happened here was learning. It developed classical conditioning because the alarm is naturally going to cause you to wake up. Loud noise causing me to wake up naturally happens. But every time the loud noise happened, because of the start of the leakage was starting to happen, that leakage was happening while the child's bladder was still full. So then what was happening is just the feeling of a full bladder, this conditioned stimulus, was leading to the conditioned response of waking up. So now it's the full bladder, not just the ringing of the bell that makes me wake up. These are all signs of classical conditioning that we see here. And again, a lot of other samples here. Let's say you're a cancer patient and you go and you get chemotherapy, and chemotherapy is going to make you nauseous. It's natural. Chemotherapy makes us nauseous. Unconditioned stimulus, unconditional response. We become nauseous with chemotherapy. But if every time I'm getting this drug, this chemotherapy in a waiting room, and this chemotherapy is making me nauseous, pretty soon just going to the waiting room is going to make me nauseous. You don't get into a car accident. Before a car accident, there's no reason to be fearful of the car. There's no reason. You get into an accident, and that accident is going to give you fear. Of course, getting in an accident is going to give me fear. I get in an accident in this car, and then suddenly I am now conditioned to fear the car going back into it. This last one a little bit weird. Let's say you kiss someone and you start to get a little bit excited. Now that's very natural. You kiss someone and say, "Ooh, that got a warm, tingly feeling inside." That's natural to happen. But let's say the person that you're making out with also tends to like onions. And as they're making out with you, you're like, kind of digging the onions, and you're still getting pretty excited. Well, then after a while, you're going to HEB, you're near the onions, and you're all flustered because you've associated the onions with the kiss. All right. Probably more likely you're going to do that with a cologne or a perfume or something like that. But these are all examples of classical conditioning. Nausea, anxiety, arousal. These are all things they naturally know how to do. It's a different stimulus that's causing these things. And businesses use it, to put a meal with a catchy slogan, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, is that McDonald's? Or the big golden arches or whatever, the theme songs in movies. The fact that a lot of songs get remade because I've already conditioned to like the previous song, now I like this. The fact that in Vegas, there's no clocks and they pump in oxygen into the casinos. And the reason they do, and you shouldn't go to casinos because gambling's wrong and immoral, but the reason they do it is because if I look down at my watch and it's 3 a.m, they go, "Oh my God, it's 3 a.m, I need to go to bed." They don't want you to go to bed. They want you to stay at that table as long as possible because the odds are in their favor. And the longer you gamble, the more likely they are to win because they never run out of money. So how does this happen? Well, a few stages have to happen. In order for me to become conditioned, first off, what has to happen is the acquisition. And the acquisition is that initial stage of learning. Again, food's going to automatically make me salivate. So it's when you're taking the conditioned stimulus to get the conditioned response. And when it comes to acquisition, when it comes to learning, you need to do it quickly. If I ring a bell and they give my dog food 30 minutes later, there's 30 minutes worth of other stuff that's happened. So it's going to be harder for them to associate, "Oh yeah, that bell rang half an hour ago," with the two things. So the quicker that it happens, bell food, bell food, bell food is going to be more effective than bell food, bell food. It's quicker bell food, bell food, bell food. Less effective at 10 seconds, less effective at 30 seconds, less effective at a minute. Okay, so the quicker you put the two together, the more likely they are to associate because there are fewer things to distract. So eventually the bell will cause the salivation. Now, here's the other problem with it is extinction. if they're not rewarded. For example, if I were to go downstairs and go to a certain drawer in this house and pull out a leash and show it to my dogs, they would get very excited because they like to go for walks. Walks naturally make them excited. They've associated the leash with going for a walk. So the leash in of itself makes them excited. So it's become a conditioned stimulus. The leash has become a conditioned stimulus that leads to conditioned response of the excitement and jumping around and whatever else. But then if I take the leash and I put it away and I don't take them for a walk, they're not going to be too pleased with me. As a matter of fact, the next time I bring out the leash, they'll get excited, but they won't get as excited as they were before. So once I get this acquisition and I've learned it, each time I do not reward the person, that association gets a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less, and it becomes extinction. If you got into a car accident, let's say you got into a car accident, the next time you get into a car, you're going to be a little bit shaky, but you get into the car again, and your nerves are going to start to go down, start to go down. You fail a test, you're going to have a little bit of anxiety about tests, but then you do well on them, you do well on them. It's going to start to go down a little bit. But what it can also lead to is a spontaneous recovery. Now, spontaneous recovery is when something takes you back to that initial thing. Let's say, again, you got into a car accident. All right. You were in a car accident at some point, and so now you've associated the car with a fearful time. But you get back in a car, you drive again. It's no big deal. Everything's fine. So your fear is going down, 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 down. And then suddenly you're at the same place where maybe you had the accident before. Somebody screeches their wheels and it sort of takes you back. And you have that spontaneous recovery, that PTSD, that song that reminds you of a breakup, that perfume that reminds you of a bad time, whatever. We go back to that bad time. Could go back to the good time as well. Okay. So again, this is a spontaneous recovery. It's not going to be as intense as it was originally when we learned it, but it still can come back in waves like that. Other stuff there on acquisition, extinction, spontaneous recovery, if you want to take a look at it there. Now, what also tends to happen, it gets us into a little bit of trouble, is the idea of generalization. Generalization is when we put things together that don't necessarily need to go together. You date a girl and she does you wrong and you think all girls are terrible. Well, that's a generalization because of one bad experience. All right, all women are like this, all guys are like this, all dentists are sadists, whatever, because you had one bad experience. It's like when kids tell me, I went to therapy, I tried therapy, but it didn't work. You tried one therapist. It's like saying you dated one person and dating doesn't work. You can't generalize all of them because of one bad experience. You come in and you take a psychology class. I can't take tests. You haven't taken one of mine, but you've associated tests with bad grades. A scenario I had back when I graduated from college, I had some friends of mine who actually served in Operation Desert Storm. They come back from Desert Storm, and we went to a football game at A&M, and it's back when A&M had an open stadium and whatnot, and they have this really loud cannon when they score. My friends didn't know this, so A&M scores a touchdown, and boom, this cannon that can be heard throughout the Bryan College Station area goes off. My friends associated it with this, and they went into fear. Then they had the opposite move of hitting the ground as well, because they were classically conditioned that loud noise means danger. You go to the dentist and you hear that sound and you associate it with the same, and then you hear a construction drill and you say, that's a generalization. So what we need to do is we need to sometimes learn to discriminate between things. When a dog drools, you feed the dog every time you show them a circle with the red that's red, and every time they see red or the circle, they start to salivate. Then you show them an oval and you do not feed them. They learn to discriminate the difference. You date one person that's fantastic after dating a loser, you discriminate. Not all people are jerks. Okay. And a lot of times therapy is about this discrimination, not blaming everybody for these particular things. But a lot of times with racism, whatnot, we tend to generalize people positively and negatively. Okay, now John Watson is crazy. He's known as the father of behaviorism. I don't know why. He was after Pavlov. He's a little bit crazy. I think I talked about him a little bit when we talked about the history of psychology. But he basically said, if you can't see it, it must not be happening. He believed that every kid was born a blank slate. You can make them whatever the heck you wanted to make them, just through a series of rewards and punishments. He said he could take any child from any orphanage and make them the next great doctor, the next great scientist, the next great criminal, just based on shaping. Now, again, this wasn't universally accepted today, but at the time it was kind of interesting because, again, it was going away from that idea of Darwin and surviving of Galton. Galton is his name. Galton was the cousin of Darwin, who also believed in eugenics, and Galton, Sir Francis Galton. There we go. I feel better. All right. But anyways, so his idea that everyone could just sort of, you could build everyone from the ground up and it was all based on experiences, it went a little bit too far. And he did a lot of studies that probably wouldn't be looked at as ethical today. The most famous of them was the baby Albert study. The baby John, he took an 11-month-old baby named Albert, and he took little Albert. And again, you can pause on this, go to the videos within the website here. I don't put the videos in the PowerPoint because this goes on YouTube and there becomes a copyright problem. But if you take a look on YouTube, there are these videos of baby Albert. And he took this 11-month-old baby and who has no natural reason to be afraid of an animal because of no experiences. A little white, you give a kid anything, they're not going to be afraid of it. You give a little baby a snake, they're not going to be afraid of it because they haven't associated the snake with anything bad. So they give them little white rats, little kitty cats, little dogs, little everything else, and there's no fear. Then what he does is every time the baby Albert touches a little white rat, there's a guy behind him with a steel bar and a hammer. And every time he touches the white rat, he goes, bam! So again, he touches the rat, bam! Now, the loud noise is fear. So what baby Albert did is he associated the fear with the rats. So then after this happened over a period of days, weeks, months, whatever, baby Albert started, every time you showed him a rat, he started to get scared because he associated these two. Even though there wasn't a steel bar and a hammer, this fear of the rats, that rat causes me fear. And then he generalized it to other white things. And he generalized it to other furry animals. And he sort of had this problem. So again, is this ethical? Absolutely not. By the way, what happened to baby Albert died at the age of 6 due to fluid in his brain, which had nothing to do with this study. So whether or not it had any long-term effects or not, who knows? Okay, so there's no way to know. John Watson is known as the father of behaviorism because, again, he's a bit of an egomaniac. John Watson had to leave the field of psychology generally because he did a lot of unethical studies, had affairs with various assistants, just kind of a bad guy. But then he goes into advertising, which was brilliant on his part because advertising is all about association. This was one of the first ads that he ever did in the 1920s, Maxwell House Coffee. Notice this is nothing about the flavor of the coffee, the taste of the coffee, whatever, but what it does is it associates the coffee with elegance. It associates it with class. If you're drinking this, you're associated with this. It's going to make you. It's the reason why people will spend the difference between 20 cents for a bottle of Kroger or HEB water versus someone will go someplace and spend a $2.50 for a bottle of Avion. It's water, but you associate it with, oh, I've paid more, so it must be worth more because it's in the special bottle or whatever. The swoosh on the shirt we associate with athletics, it's Nike, it's Adidas. So, and again, I say this as someone who's wearing Adidas shoes. So I'm no better. I'm no better. They're just really comfortable. But I'm no better. But we make that sort of association with those particular things. Some examples of some ads that Watson did there. Now, again, when it comes to advertising, we use that halo effect that we've talked about before. You take a likable celebrity and it's already been established. So let's say you take someone like Joe Montana or Peyton Manning or JJ Watt. All right. These are, you through time and their playoff appearances, whatever, you now like these people. Okay. So now you don't have to be conditioned to like them anymore because now you like them. Okay. So now you take them. So then what I want to do is I want to associate this pizza with those people. You see this pizza and I associate the pizza with the people, and well, I like the people and the people like the pizza, then I'm gonna like that pizza as well. And that pizza becomes likable. And again, we use this with attractive models. She's pretty. There's perfume. Well, the perfume, if she's pretty, she must know about perfume. So if I give her a little halo and I think that her beauty means that she knows about perfume, I'm going to like the perfume as well. So any sort of testimonials, which again, how much these people get paid. Kim Kardashian can make like $250,000 by sending out one tweet about a fashion. It's insane. But since people associate her with glamour and fashion and whatnot, people will pay for that. Now there's also the reverse halo. You take this guy who was one of the heads of the Papa John's Pizza until he was part of a little thing where he said a little bad thing about something. I can't even remember what it was. So you get the reverse halo and you put little devil horns on him. We don't like him now because he's a bit of a racist. Well, he's a racist and I don't like his pizza. So then suddenly I'm going to think that the pizza is unlikable. So I got to get his face off the box and suddenly have Shaquille O'Neal show up and be in the ads. And Shaquille O'Neal owns like a ton of Papa John's pizzas. All right. So again, that's all classical conditioning. Advertising is classical conditioning. All right. That wraps up Unit 6, Part 1. Your next lecture will be on operant conditioning.